Now we want to move from just sort of session mechanics to how we effectively use session to affect a login, logout. As I mentioned several times, we establish a session usually well before any login has happened. And login is best thought of as changing data in the session, not the session itself. The cookie and the session sort of establish a relationship between a browser and a bit of data on the server that is the session data corresponding to that browser. And so session is all about making that connection and changing data in the server in our application. And so let's take a look at this application, our login. Here is how it works, okay? And if we run this and we take a look at the session, we will see under resources that we already have a cookie set, right? There's a session ID. And that's because we got a page and it sets a session and there's data in the server. It's just there's nothing in this data right now, okay? So the data that's in the session is what decides that we're logged in or not. So we're not currently logged in, so I'm going to hide this because nothing's going to change because the session is going to be there forever. And now it's more about how our application goes through various states of itself, changing session data and looking at session data. So we're not logged in. It's an online address book. We're going to log in. And this is, and the way to log in on this is all the passwords are UMSI. So when we log in, this is a post. We're going to do the post redirect. We're going to assume that from now on. And then we go to the main page, and now it's doing index.php. And then we can do a logout, right? And this is all the same file. Login is login.php, csav umsi, login. Now, we don't have a database yet. We will soon, but we don't yet. So here's a street, 105 South State, Ann Arbor, Michigan, 48 something something something. And now we're going to actually store this data with the update in the session. So if I refresh this, it's actually going to pull the data from the session, which is my street, city, state. And then when I log out, it clears the session and restarts everything and does login to start. Okay? So remember that basic flow. Let's take a look at the source code of this. Here's the basic flow. Okay. So at the top, remember there's a top part and a bottom part. So I'm just going to start doing these more in order rather than sort of in. So in the top, if we are receiving a post, the post has to do with handling the login data. And so if there's a post variable called account and a post variable called password, we're going to clear, unset. We're going to log out the current user by unsetting the account key in the session. And if the PW password in the post data is UMSI, then we're going to store in the session the account, which is the account name from the post data, and put a little success message, and then redirect back to ourselves. If the password is not UMSI, we're going to put in the incorrect password, and then redirect back to ourselves. And so this is our login.php. So let's just run that. So here's login.php. And if we post, the account is UMSI. And if I do bad password, it's going to redirect back to login with an error. We'll see how that flash message comes up. csav umsi. I'll get it right this time. And now you'll notice that it redirects to index.php. Okay, so let's take a look at that code again. So sometimes we redirect to index, sometimes we redirect to login, and we set data in the session to change kind of the internal state of our application. Okay. So here we have in login, we're looking in the session. If the error is set in the session, we're going to print out the error message in red, and then we're going to do what's called unset. This is a pattern that's often called flash messages. So it's an error that we detect in the post code that we're going to store in the session and then redirect and then display in the get, because the post doesn't produce output. So we have to sort of stuff this error in so that the next get will show it, but then if you did a refresh, you don't want to see the error again. So we actually, once we display, the moment we display the error, we take it out of the session. So let me show you how that works. So I can say csev and a bad password. So this is a post request that is going to set an error message that is going to redirect to a get that's going to show us the error message. Oh, I did it wrong. Log out, log in. Bad. It's a post request that's going to set the error message and redirect back to login.php and display the message. And then this message at the moment of its display was deleted from the session. So if I hit refresh, another get, refresh another get, it won't be there. That's why we call it a flash message. It sort of shows once and then is gone. You see this in a lot of applications where they have a message that appears. And the same will be true when we do a successful login. We'll see that there is flash code, flash style code that looks for the success message in session in the index.php, which we redirected back to. Okay. So other than that, there's really not much interesting in this file. We got like our form. We print the flash message. That's kind of the new thing right there, this flash pattern. Pull a message from the session, print it out, and then take it back out of the session. Flash pattern. The logout is particularly simple. You simply do a session start, a session destroy, and then redirect index.php. You'd be surprised how many logouts are just a few lines of code, because that's all they got to do. Blast the session and then redirect to index.php. Okay, so now we're looking at the main body of this code. Now the main body of this code, index, is either going to just send us to the login screen, or it's going to let us fill in some data here. So let's take a look at how that is achieved. So first we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to see the flash pattern. That's the flash pattern here. In this case, we're being redirected into, we're in index.php. We're being redirected into from the login, and they put a message in session under the key success. And if we see this, we print it and then we delete it. We unset it. Unsetting is the way to take the key success out of $_session. So you just unset $session sub success. Okay. Now, this is the data. Once we've stored data, we haven't done this yet. So in the first get we're coming through here, this data is not street, city, state, and zip are not in the session. So we take the defaults of blank, blank, and blank. Okay. And then we continue down. Now here's how we know whether we're logged in or not. This is a key thing, right? We look at is set session, right? If session sub account is set, that means we're logged in. And account is like csev or something like that. And if it's not set, then we print out the login message. If it is set, that's the else clause down here, we're going to print out the form. And in that form, we put the old version of street that came out of the session, right? HTML street, city, state, etc. And then we have just a sort of basic form, and away we go. Now it also has this pattern of we can make a button that has an onClick method that transfers the browser to logout.php, returning false, so that it suppresses any post that might happen. So return false means no post. It says navigate the browser to logout.php. It's kind of like a redirect, but in JavaScript, basically. So when someone presses that logout button, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so there we go. Now, if we look at the top of the code is sort of the above line code, right? This is the model and controller. This is the view code down there. We just got done talking about that. But basically, the code just does a session start and checks to see if these 4 post variables are set. And if they are, they copy the post data into the session using the same key, and then redirect back to the top. And so another GET request comes through, and then that's how we get the data. Okay? And so I hope it's starting to make some sense at this point. Right? So we have just, because we see this logged in message, we have just at this moment seen the, oops, clear, click. We have just been redirected to from the login a success. So I put in something in the street, put in something in the city, put in something in the zip, and I press update, and that is going to run that bit of code at the top that copies all these post variables into session, and then it redirects back with no flash message, right? So if I do a developer console here, pull this down a little bit and do network, I do an update, and that's a post and then a redirect back to itself. Now in the redirect, the data for these old values is coming out of the session because the post code copied the values. And so if I change this to be super street and hit update, then it's going to copy this new data back in the session, redirect to the top of the script, and then pull that data out. I mean, what we see is it's magic, right? It just stays there. But really, that's a whole 2 request response cycles between the time we hit the update and the time it changes. But the browser is so quick, and it doesn't even look like it redrew anything. But it's a full redraw of the page. Ready? Redraw. Post. Redirect. Redraw. But it looks like nothing ever changed. And then, of course, the logout not only throws away the fact that you're logged in with the account key, but it also throws away the data that was in there as well. And so the logout just destroys the session. Now that's a GET response. It does a GET response to logout, but then logout destroys the session, starts the session, then destroys the session, and then redirects back to index.php. Okay, so that's kind of log in and log out. So the last thing I want to talk about just briefly is the fact that even though I just got done talking all about cookies, it is possible to need to manage sessions without cookies. There's a compromise involved when you do that. If you have a simple full screen application that people aren't going to log in with different accounts on different tabs, you just use cookies and life's all okay. But sometimes you want an application where it's doing something more sophisticated, or it's used as a tool within some other application, and you might actually have more than one thing going at the same time, logged in different ways. Or within an iframe, if the iframe is coming from a different host than the original outer navigation is. So there are times when you want to be able to maintain session without using a cookie, and PHP has really good support for this. I don't know why the other frameworks like Rails or Java do not have nearly as good a support for this, but PHP is quite nice. Now there's some compromises we'll talk about toward the end. So here is an example of some cookieless code. Let me go ahead and bring this up. So we're going to take a look at how this works without cookies, okay? And so let's take a look at this nocookie.php. And before I start, I'm going to actually delete the cookie and do a GET request. Now, here's the first thing to notice. Okay, I'm going to do a GET request, and this code is not going to use cookies. And so it basically makes a session right then, because I told it to start a session. I'll show you the code in a second. Session is empty, and it starts a session. And you'll notice there are no cookies. There are no cookies. It did not set a cookie. We didn't send a cookie. We don't have a cookie set for localhost. Now if I hit refresh again, it has no way of knowing what the session was. There's no cookie. So you'll see that it makes another session every time. And so it has to have a way of moving the sessions back and forth. And so it has to either add a get parameter, or for all forms it has to add a post parameter. And so if you look at this anchor tag, it will have a session ID. Okay, and so now you'll see that the URL has the session ID on it. This has its own problems, but now I can click this anchor tag as much as I like. Okay, and it's doing session things. And the way the server is reconnecting with the same session is because this PHP session ID is on there. The same thing can happen with a form, but you do it differently. So I'm going to click on the submit button here. Now I'm not doing redirect, but I'm doing a post. So if you look in this post data, there is the click, which is the submit button, but also the session ID is being sent as post data. So I can click this as often as I like, and it still keeps working. So there's a way to communicate from one request response cycle to the next, the session ID, either as a get parameter or as a hidden post parameter. It doesn't show up here, but it is hidden post parameter. So let me show you how that kind of works. Okay, so if we want to tell PHP not to use cookies, you have to throw these three statements in at the beginning. It's kind of gibberish, but you just throw it in. And what you're really saying is, do not use cookies, do not exclusively use cookies, and I don't know what that last one means. And then you start the session. So you have to say this before. All of it has to happen before any output happens. And then that's all we're going to do. And so the next thing we're going to see is the view code. And this PHP is PHP we've been playing with all along, where it basically, you know, if there's the session sub value, session start has established a session, maybe a new one every time, as we were seeing before. If it's empty, we set session sub value to 1. If it's less than 3, we add 1. And if it's greater than 3, we session destroy and session restart, just so this code can happen. Okay, and so this is sort of similar to the stuff we've been doing. Once sessions are established, this is just playing with the session. So let's take a look at the view code. So we have in here, click the anchor tag. We have an href, okay, and it's no cookie.php. And then we have a form with an input type that's a button. Now what happens is when PHP knows it's not using cookies, it realizes that if it just uses these URLs unadulterated, then it will lose track of its session. So it actually messes with the output that you produce. And let's take a look at how that happens here. Okay, so we'll do an inspect element. If you take a look at the inspect element, this href tag, which we put out as noCookie.php, PHP has actually augmented this and added PHP session ID on as a get parameter. We didn't write that code. PHP was looking at the output we were producing and sort of sneak that in for us. Okay, and so that's one thing. And here's our form. So here's this form was our line and this input was our line, but PHP added this input type equals hidden for us, which passes the PHP session in as incoming post data. And so whether or not we're doing an anchor click or a submit button, one way or the other, this value is being transferred to the next request response cycle. And if you lose track of it, even for one request response cycle, you're done, because it starts a new session at that point. So I just show you this so that you know that it's possible to maintain session state if you carefully move the session on every form post and every href, etc., etc., etc. And we'll see this again later. So I just don't want to tell you that the only way to do sessions is through cookies. Now I showed you how PHP automatically adds PHP session ID to the end of hrefs and forms, but it doesn't look at any JavaScript you write or any AJAX or anything like that, or even if you're doing redirects like in location headers, it doesn't do that. So you have to hand add them to those kinds of things. The other danger is if someone bookmarks the URL and it's a get URL and has the session on it, or sends email to somebody with a URL, you got to be careful, because that can sort of allow someone to log in. And so there's other tricks that you can do to basically, that you have to start thinking about when you start using non-cookie sessions, about when to invalidate a session and when it might be coming from somewhere else. Maybe someone clicked from a completely different IP address. We'll come back to these things a bit later. So that was quite a bit of stuff, because again, we're connecting a bunch of things, right? We're connecting cookies, which are little bits of stuff is stored in the browser. We are connecting sessions, which is data that the server stores. how we use sessions in PHP, which is session start, session destroy, and the $_session. The login, logout pattern of how we use the session in particular ways to indicate login and logout. The need for the post redirect pattern so that you post the data, you send a location header back, and it does another get so that you can hit refresh without causing that nasty thing. And we also talked about cookie-free sessions, mostly as a placeholder for some future exploration. So thanks.